3 years following the start of the pandemic, a large body of research is providing more insight into the connection between COVID-19 and cardiac arrest. According to a recent study published in the scientific journal Nature Medicine, those who have recovered from COVID-19 experience substantially higher rates of conditions like stroke and heart failure. Now, this is compared to those who never contracted the virus. Another study published last year by researchers at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles adds to this latest finding. The study says that while the virus is connected to an increased risk of heart attacks for all age groups, people between the ages of 25 to 44 saw the highest increase. Meanwhile, some people continue to argue that vaccines are creating a greater health risk. Well, joining us now to give us more clarity on this in our weekly medical segment is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Dr. Raut, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Great to be here, Nima.
So let's start with what we know so far about this connection between COVID-19 and conditions like stroke and heart failure. Can you give us more insight into these findings?
Right. So it's interesting because we've known for several decades that there's this transient increase in heart attacks and stroke in association with certain illnesses like influenza, pneumonia, bronchitis, and other chest infections. We know that these infections in general, these respiratory infections, put a lot of strain on the heart, and the viruses can attack the cardiac cells and cause issues as well. So there was this concern, and basically why we have this research now, whether COVID-19 would also follow similarly. And unfortunately, it does look like it certainly does, and to a very strong extent. So we see these comorbidities and debilitating diseases, especially with COVID-19, even in comparison with things like pneumonia and bronchitis.
So how can COVID-19 and its variants have such an impact on a person's health? What is the science behind this, Dr. Raut?
Right. So what we're seeing is that there might be multiple reasons for that. On one hand, the virus is causing direct damage to cells. And we know that especially true for the heart. It can cause heart remodeling so that the heart tissue actually functions worse than ever after an infection. We also know that COVID-19 causes a chain reaction of this inflammatory system in the body, which we call the ACE pathway, the angiotensin converting enzyme pathway. And this very, very super high level of inflammation, again, damages cells in a completely different way than the first way and causes a host of other issues as well that we see, mental health issues, severe fatigue, all of this we call long COVID, of course. So for us, from a pathophysiological perspective, there's multiple ways that this virus actually affects us, especially in the heart.
Very concerning information, Dr. Raut. Now, I want to jump to the study by Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Now, it highlighted a younger age group, about 25 to 44, being more at risk. So why would people who would usually be considered healthier than an older demographic be more at risk here?
Right. And it was very concerning because what they saw was almost a 30% increased risk compared to 20% in the other age groups. So definitely very concerning. The theory behind this is whether we're seeing this because COVID-19 caused a lot of issues with the heart's electrical impulses. So that causes a lot more clots and more heart attacks there, these arrhythmias and palpitations, and just this inability to sort of regulate a heart rate. And sometimes we will see that more in a younger age group where the inflammatory response would be greater.
That's quite interesting, Dr. Raut. Now, is there any way to treat or prevent such conditions from forming following recovery from the virus?
Right. I think there's still a great deal of uncertainty on these persistent symptoms, especially the cardiac symptoms. There have been a few studies that have really shown two things that have been beneficial. One is certainly a healthy lifestyle and diet and physical activity, because that reduces your chances of heart disease and diabetes and hypertension, which then reduces these comorbidities. And second is actually vaccinating against COVID-19. 3 doses have been shown to be particularly effective in reducing these post-COVID illnesses significantly.
And on the note of vaccines, I want to make sure that both sides are addressed here, Dr. Raut. So let's turn to these concerns around COVID vaccines. What do we know so far about any health conditions connected to COVID vaccines at all?
Right. So, I mean, it is established that when we look at mRNA vaccines in general, we do see these very two rare conditions that appear. One is myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart. And lining, it's also called the pericarditis when it's just the lining itself there. Now, how prevalent is this? Typically with myocarditis, you would see this in less than 1 case per 100,000 vaccine doses. So extremely rare in that case.
Now, meanwhile, in addition to that, we know officials continue to say that the benefits of using a vaccine outweigh the risk of inflammation. Can you give us more insight into the science behind this, Dr. Raut? Just about 45 seconds left here.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it goes without saying that it is much safer to always vaccinate. Looking just at the risk of myocarditis, if you compare an infection to the vaccination, the infection itself has 7 times higher chance of myocarditis anyway. So, excluding all the benefits of the infection, all of the evidence of the long COVID, if you just compared the myocarditis, the vaccine group is much safer. So, by far, the vaccine is a much better strategy than getting the infection.
All right, Dr. Raut, thanks for clarifying that. Always appreciate your time on Forum Daily.
Right. Thanks so much for having me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. And after the break, we're going to take a look at the House of Commons and Google. The Heritage Committee has summoned the tech giant's top executives to testify over their decision to temporarily block news access to some Canadians. We're going to hear from Dr. Michael Geist, the Canada Research Chair for Internet and E-commerce Law, up next, so stay tuned.